Hi, today we're talking with Louise Targett, a very senior vet industry consultant who's been in the game for nearly 30 years. And we're talking today about the recent ASQA changes. Now, I've got to say that in my 25 years of being in RTO world, I think these are the most significant changes to the industry in that time. Hi, Louise, how are you?
Hi, Travis. Well, thank you.
So, do you agree? Do you agree that these are such significant changes that we've never really seen?
Most definitely, especially when you feel proud as the owner of an RTO, whether you've just purchased it or just established it, and you have some sort of strategy in place, but sometimes for different reasons, we're not rolling out these programs immediately. And these new rules affect the timing of the programs being rolled out.
So I suppose my first question is, with all of your experience, why do you think they've taken this strategy?
Well, a few years ago, they changed their fee structure. And I'm not saying this is correct, Travis, but certainly it looks like, that there's a whole lot of RTOs out there, and it costs ASQA a whole lot of time and money because the fees that the RTOs pay don't necessarily cover, their time in whether it's re-registrations, audits, whatever it be, especially re-registrations. Because when it comes to non-compliance audits, for example, then they're on charge to the RTO. It's probably a dollars and cents exercise in a lot of ways. They don't want to see. It's not like paying ASIC, your annual registration for a business, and you can just leave it as a shelf business, leave it sitting there, filed away, and one day you might pick it up again and run with it. It's not like that. There's a lot of ongoing compliances that are required as an RTO, running an RTO, and an established RTO day to day must have the compliances in place. So, for ASQA, it's just too much hard work. I think it's part of a strategy to wean them out.
So let's have a look at a couple of those. An RTO's registration will automatically lapse if it does not deliver any training or assessment to vet students for a consecutive 12-month period. Does this also include units of competency as opposed to full qualifications?
It means anything on the scope. So if you don't have a full qualification on your scope, if you only have random units, then yes, you're affected. I mean, basically the timing sits perfectly with the RTO compliances. In other words, by the end of February each year, every RTO must lodge their VetMIS data. Now they're using compliance software. In other words, software that is validated in the VetMIS system when they lodge it. So it doesn't go through if it's not compliant with the system. So the reason why I'm saying that is that cutoff is the end of February. And then by the end of March, this is when this new rule came out. It was effective as of the 29th of March. So in other words, ASQA have had time to see the data that's been uploaded by RTOs. And if it's lodged as a nil data, in other words, no students in the system, they're the RTOs that automatically received an email. Obviously, if that RTO has a re-registration due within that period, it could have come up last year. Their registration might have been due, say, in October last year, but it's pending as a re-registration, and ASQA has not approved it yet for different reasons. It could be on the waiting list. There could be other issues. Or it could be coming up for re-registration in 2024. So the new rule is around those RTOs that lodge nil data that are due for re-registration.
Next one is the minister may determine that ASQA is not required to accept or process initial registration applications for a period of 12 months. What does that mean? And how do you think that affects the market of both vendors and purchasers?
Well, I mean, an RTO should be increasing in value every day. just by having the RTO. I mean, you're the guru when it comes to selling RTOs, Travis. I don't get involved with the sale price, but I can see the value would be increasing. It makes complete sense because the processes are becoming more and more difficult in a positive way. It's about continuous improvement, compliances. And, you know, it's easy for someone to sit back and roll their eyes and say, oh, here we go again, another new rule, another new compliance or a tighter situation. But it is generally, if you can see it from ASQA's perspective, for the good of the industry, of the reputation of the industry, worldwide for that matter, and also for the benefit of other RTOs. So it gives everyone a fair chance to survive. So, you know, what does that mean? You're saying, well, I think that's what it means, just to increase the reputation of the industry and help the good operators out there survive in a more positive way.
Yeah, and look, just on that, 7 years ago when I started selling RTOs, a shell RTO would have been about 85,000. Today, the minimum is 120 because of those barriers to entry. And it really then becomes what we call a non-depreciating asset. And as you said at the start, that asset value does continue to rise. I also read that in saying that the minister has the ability now to not approve any new RTOs. And that not only that, they've got a great discretion how they prioritise, consider, and make decisions on those initial applications as well, which means that if you're wanting to establish your own RTO, it's going to be bloody difficult now and a lot more difficult, especially with the next point. RTOs now need to be in operation for 24 months before they can apply to change their scope of registration. This allows ASQA to review the RTOs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that basically means that you've got 2 years where you can't change scope. And if you don't deliver in 12 months, then you'll be basically shut down. Is that how you see that?
Yes, but I should clarify, Travis, that rule, that 24 months, has actually been around for a long time. That's not a new one. So for any new RTO that's newly registered, the first 2 years, the accreditation period is only for that first 2 year period, and the logic, the reasoning is because ASQA have only approved that RTO based on paperwork evidence. Basically, they want to see real students or real bums on seats, as we say, when it comes to booking in students and in getting them through the system, the training, the assessing, whether it's online, whether it's in person, whatever it be. And if they drop out, well, that's a different scenario. But even the fact that they went through the enrolment process, they maybe commenced the course, they may have gone through RPL, whatever the process. But that first 2 year period is a test for the new RTO owners, managers, and admin people and trainer assessors to roll out the paperwork that was approved and fine tune it, improve it, make amendments where required, and have some real hands-on experience then, so that when ASQA come back in 2 years' time to re-audit, they want to see some real student scenarios. What happened? Good, bad, indifferent. It doesn't matter whether they finished or not. It's more about the RTO people learning the ropes as such. So that 2 year period has always been around. And then after that, yes, of course, RTOs can add, once the re-registration is approved, they normally would get an automatic 7 year. Then they can add whatever they want to the scope.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Louise. What do you think, what impact do these changes have? We'll go with purchases first. So what impact do you think this has on buyers, all these changes?
Okay, so the key change is, like we said before, if there was no data reported, in other words, nil students went through the books of that RTO in the calendar year, okay, so January to December, because that's the data that's being reported. So let's use 2023 as an example. If there was a new purchaser that purchased an RTO in 2023, by the time they went through the purchase, by the time they went through the change of ownership, because they have 90 days, remember, to lodge that, and it's needed. That is needed because of all the requirements that must be submitted to ASQA. The 90 days is fair and reasonable. So then by the time that's passed, and there's general internal meetings, discussions around who's going to be the new CEO, what's the logic behind it, improvements of strategies, new business planning, all of that sort of thing. That is a key reason why that RTO potentially had no students and didn't get to have any in the whole year. How does it affect the new purchaser? Well, possibly the purchaser doesn't even like the scope of the RTO they bought. I've seen that time and time again, and I'm sure you have, Travis, because it's not actually about the scope, right? They can add to that scope and change it, amend it, change the strategy, all the rest of it. And I know a true example right now of this situation, an RTO that I've been working with, and last year purchased, they were new purchasers of an RTO, and they didn't like the scope of the one qualification that was on the scope. So they didn't remove that qualification because it's not like they're concerned about it being removed. They will offer it, but it's not their core business. So instead, once the change of ownership went through, they lodged an addition to scope application, and that hasn't been approved as yet in their industry. So they didn't roll out any courses because the end of the year came, they didn't get their addition to scope approved, and their re-registration is due this year.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
they're,
I was just going to say, it's almost like it's not as bad as it may seem on the surface if you've got a plan.
Correct. So if you got that email as an RTO owner and you follow the instructions, there's a 3-step opportunity. Okay. So briefly on each one, step 1 is basically not an option as far as I'm concerned. It's basically admitting fault. It's admitting that you lodged your EvetMIS data as at end of February this year and you stuffed up. You made a mistake and it's incorrect. I can't see how that could happen when it's a validated system. But,
No.
I suppose potentially there could be a logical reason, special cases. But generally, most people would not go with option 1 because they lodged nil data for a reason. And jumping forward, number 3, option 3 is letting your registration lapse, which most RTO owners aren't going to do that, right? That's basically throwing it away, losing everything. So let's go back to step number 2, option number 2, which is really the only option that genuine RTO owners need to take. There's 2 parts to it. There's actually 2 forms, the links that you click on if you receive that email. The first part is applying for an extension of the measurement period, as they term it. The measurement period was the whole of 2023, from January to December. And because you lodged nil data for that period, you're asking ASQA for an extension to that period. In other words, you're going back saying, we do have students, yes, they've just been a bit slow with getting enrolments in and whatnot, and we will have them by, say, the 30th of June. So in other words, you're going to apply to up to and 30th of June is a realistic time frame when you look at now we're in April, and this advice must be lodged back to ASQA by the end of this month. So that gives you, say to June, give or take, as a guide, to let them know you have got some students, even if it's 1 or 2. In other words, guinea pig students. If you're a new owner, I call them guinea pig students because it's a test run. You're going to do everything right by the student as best as you possibly can because they're your first 2 students. So they're not guinea pigs in the true sense of the word. It's purely you at your
Understand,
level, as in you're learning the ropes. And then the second part to that number 2 step, ASQA response, apply for the extension, first part. Second part is then complete the link that basically gives ASQA a real reason why you didn't have any students in 2023. And there are some legitimate reasons that it appears, I'm not going to sit back and say yes because this is new, right? but it appears legitimate reasons will be accepted by ASQA. And one of them is a change of ownership. And if you explain that situation, just like the real case I explained earlier, then there's one. Another one could be a genuine illness. Someone that's hands-on, like a CEO, especially smaller RTOs where they really rely on that hands-on manager. And if there's a genuine illness where the person was out of action for a big part of last year, then again, you are required to provide proof. So, it's not just putting some words on paper and hope that ASQA will accept it. I don't know how tough they're going to be. Of course, we haven't seen this before, but the online link does ask for evidence.
Yeah.
For any reason that's given.
Well, I think the secret is, if you are purchasing an RTO, then you've got some time to be able to extend that period, so that you can say, hey, look, we've just bought it. These are our plans. Here's our action items, and move forward. What about, very, very quickly, what about on the other side? So I'm thinking of selling my RTO and I've just received a letter. What do I do?
Okay, now that is probably more common than new owners, because new owners are usually keen to get their teeth into it, as long as there's no major delays with the changeover. For sellers, possibly, unless they're selling the RTO at a high, like they have a lot of students on the books, but there's also a lot of owners, as you would see, Travis, that are just tired, whether they want to retire, change of life, whatever it be, and they wind down. And especially because we've been through COVID as well. A lot of RTOs did that because of COVID affected, and then they sort of lost the momentum, let's say, and rethought their future plans, and never really got the RTO back up and running since COVID. And it's legitimate. So, and we see that. I know you see it, Travis. I see it all the time, those RTOs. Yeah. So they've finally come to terms with it, because it's like 2 years since COVID ended. Maybe finally come to terms with the fact, you know what, I'm better off doing the right thing by this business and on selling it. And they might even have plans to continue to work in the industry, which is great. So how does it affect them? It's a challenging one, because their RTO is still worth dollars and cents, even without students. I would recommend that they get students, that they get even just anywhere up to, say, half a dozen, a small number. In other words, don't put the pressure on themselves, because they don't want it. Clearly, that's why they're selling it. But it gets them to continue to use the processes and the paperwork and the resources that are already in place. Remember, when you're selling an RTO, you're meant to have the trainer assessor on the books as such, and up-to-date files. You're meant to have your training resources for the qualifications that you're offering, or units of competency. You're meant to have training and assessment strategies. So they're the key three things. And then, of course, there's everything else, like your enrollment paperwork and blah, blah, blah. So it's probably best that you continue to try to use those at minimum levels anyway. It looks better for the sale, and it keeps the trainer active as well, proactive in the business, which is good for the RTO, to show that there's activity. And then, of course, when it comes to lodging data, I mean, if you just had just one student last year, as an example of a vendor who wants to sell his RTO, and he lodged a VetMIS data for one student, and I know a real example of one, you would not have got that email.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You would not have got that ASQA email. One student, that's all it took.
Yeah. Well, look, I suppose, just in conclusion, it's this has been so enlightening, and I'm sure that everyone who's going to be watching it has picked up some pieces in it, because it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
Have a plan, but act quickly.
Exactly right. And again, I should reinforce, Travis, that the value of RTOs are increasing. There's no doubt about it, because the processes are getting tighter and more difficult to register. So that's got to be a win-win for owners. who want to sell, and also for people coming in through the system and want to purchase one.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And as always, Louise, thank you so much for your time. You are a true beacon in the industry, and I just love learning from you all the time.
Thanks so much, Travis. Lovely
Thanks.
to chat.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.